Here's what happened today in Bolivia. On October the 20th, Bolivia held the first round of its 2019 elections. Evo Morales came first. He won at least 45% of the vote to the second place finisher, Carlos Mesa's share of the vote, which was 36%. That much is not disputed by anyone. Morales was always expected to come first in the first round. What is disputed is what happened when the election results stopped being updated on that night. Once they were finally updated on the next day, Morales had 47% of the vote, which was enough for him to win outright in the first round. In Bolivia, there's a second round runoff election if the first place finisher does not beat the second place finisher by at least 10% of the vote. So what's contested here is not whether Evo Morales came first, it's whether he actually won in the first round legitimately or not. The opposition was hoping for a second round runoff. Since then, there's been protests and constant calls for Morales to resign, despite the fact that with or without the alleged fraud, he still came first in the first round. The Organization of American States audited the results and said that there were irregularities. They called for new elections. This afternoon, that is the 10th of November 2019, Evo Morales agreed to all of the demands of the OAS. He announced that not only were new elections going to be called, and that international observers would have full access, but that Bolivia's Electoral Commission would also be reformed, with all of its appointees being replaced to OAS standards. This was not enough for the opposition, who again had only gotten 36% of the vote to Morales' at least 45%. They didn't want new elections, they didn't want democracy. Rather than deal with the possibility that Evo Morales could have won this new election, an internationally observed election with a new electoral commission that they could not possibly have claimed is fraudulent, they sent in the military. Just hours after the new elections were announced, the military demanded that Morales resign.
Sugerimos al presidente del Estado que renuncie a su mandato presidencial.
It was only then that Morales, who was again indisputably the most popular candidate, resigned. It was not the protests, it was not international pressure, it was the coup. Yes, a military coup, that's what this is. Nothing less. Everything about this is a textbook military coup. A coup carried out just hours after a democratic solution was announced with the support of the major regional organization. It doesn't matter whether you're a conservative, a liberal, or a socialist. If you're celebrating this obvious coup, rather than lamenting the fact that the military carried it out mere hours after a democratic solution was announced, you have absolutely no principles, and this will rightfully be used against you for years to come. It doesn't matter if you think that Evo Morales was unpopular and that he would have lost the election anyway. Then it should have been allowed to happen. Let him lose the election. It doesn't matter if you think it was wrong that Evo Morales was running for another term. If the people thought that was wrong, they had the chance to vote him out in the new elections. It doesn't matter if you think the first election was fraudulent. A democratic solution was agreed to. And then if that new election was also somehow fraudulent, despite all of the observers and the electoral reform that would have been involved, then you may have had a point. But that didn't happen. You can't be for a military coup in the face of literally any other option and still pretend that you legitimately give a single crap about democracy. This was a military coup. This was the liberal and conservative opposition, who knew for a fact that they were less popular than Evo Morales, as evidenced by the initial results of the election, where they were ecstatic by the prospect of just making it to the second round, choosing a military coup when a free and fair election was clearly on the table. This is that true face. If you consider yourself a liberal or a conservative, then ask yourself, is it also yours? Is this who you are? Because if you support this, the answer is yes. At least have the stones to take the mask off and admit it, rather than stumbling around and trying some mental gymnastics to find a democratic excuse for a literal military coup against a democratically elected government right after democratic elections were announced. Evo Morales took Bolivia from a totally stagnant nation with rampant poverty, GDP per capita levels that literally hadn't grown in 22 years, that was ruled by a white minority, into an inclusive nation with a booming economy where living standards rose more in just 13 years than they had in the previous centuries. This is what the opposition are against. This is what they seek to dismantle. This is why this military coup happened. The international media is framing their headlines and bylines to make it sound like Morales just resigned after protests. That's not what happened. Morales announced new elections because of the protests. He resigned because of the military coup. A coup that happened for one simple reason. Because Evo Morales' Bolivia worked more for the poor than for the rich. That's all.